approximately forever.
We cannot afford to be so politically correct anymore. Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo.
Please continue to hold for the next available representative.
Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo.
We appreciate you waiting and waiting. What is it you're waiting for? Do you even know anymore?
These are people who work hard but no longer have a voice. I am your voice.
Has been disconnected.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another rendition of the weekly wrap-up. Make sure you guys smash that like button down below. We got 20 likes to go, then the face cam comes on. Although we will start the introduction, we're going to be covering, I'd like to do another 10 minutes or so, maybe 15, covering the whole debacle, the left's reaction to what took place in Minneapolis, which essentially was just poking the bear and then whining that somebody poked a bear and got bit by a bear. There's nothing else to that. But we will be covering the left's reaction regardless. We'll be getting into some 2026 stuff. Trump's updated approval rating, where is it at? We'll be getting to 2028 stuff. What moves are people like AOC making? You also have this whole draft Rubio movement that's kind of been brewing and is kind of not really going to go anywhere because Rubio doesn't even want to jump in the ring the way people may want him to, but he's doing a great job, and we're not trying to take that away from him whatsoever. And there's a lot of work to be done on that front, guys. We're not even a year into the Trump administration. It's funny because you have a lot of people that are complaining because not enough has supposedly been done, even though a tremendous amount, more than anybody could reasonably anticipate, has been done. We're starting to see a lot of the returns of that. But also you have people that are positioning for what should the post-Trump right look like, and you have plenty of morons on a lot of different sides of that whole debacle. which we've been covering ad nauseum, especially ever since the 2025 elections. What should the party do? How are they going to get voters out? What does the direction of the party need to be? I think some people will read into the midterms regardless of what happens and have some pretty rough takeaways. But I think the primaries also are going to tell us a lot, because they'll tell us which candidates are exactly thriving. So regardless, we'll be getting into all of it and more. Like the stream down below. Subscribe if you're new, and the face cam goes on, because once again, the left has pretended, we always say they pretend not to understand the argument. That is how their ideology thrives. They thrive on other people being willfully stupid. And many of these people are either just easily gaslit, or they're the gaslighters, and they have some sort of a nefarious agenda, because it's blatantly obvious what's going on. It's blatantly obvious that you have these incidents that happen, and they don't decide to take a step back and analyze what the facts could be. They decide to stoke the flames. You have sometimes paid agitators that come out of the woodwork, but you have people that willfully just go out there and decide to agitate themselves, and it's just unserious. The whole thing is unserious. You had the incident that took place in Minneapolis, where the woman tried to run over the ICE agent from ICE, as many people are now putting it, and there was ice, like snow ice on the ground. The car was trying to accelerate. So thankfully, the officer had some time to fire the self-defense shots out of his weapon. But apparently, we're being told that America shoots unarmed women indiscriminately, which is not even true. First of all, she was armed. If she was not armed but attacking, then still it wouldn't matter if she's armed or not. Unarmed does not mean that you are necessarily somebody who is innocent, or you can never justify force against somebody who is not carrying a weapon. The only problem with this argument, though, besides that, is the fact that she was armed. She was operating a 4,000-pound death machine, a deadly weapon, an SUV. This wasn't a bicycle. This wasn't even a smart car. This was a full-on SUV. Her supposed partner, or whatever they want to call the lesbian counterpart that she was with, got out of the car, started to attack these people. And this is a woman who's been, involved in a lot of, as she put it, you could say it was a joke, but it was on her Venmo receipts for terrorism back in 2020. Even if you want to say that's a joke, she was a career activist. She was not somebody who was an innocent person in a situation. She was an agitator. She was in a position where, I don't know if whatever hormones or pills she was on combined with her evil rage that decided to take over and then assume control of this vehicle and then drive it, or try to drive it over an ICE agent, who then fired back, as he had every right to do in that instance. You have, people saying that there's no federal authority. So they keep moving the goalposts because they get caught up in a lie. They keep moving the goalposts. They say, no, there's no federal authority. They don't have the authority to do something that a police officer can. They actually have more, because they do have a specific special federal authority, because they work for the feds. And this type of stuff, the media will use it to demoralize people from joining ICE as well, because they understand they've gotten 20,000 plus applications that they're going to hire people, because they were aiming for 10K. Now they're going for 20, and it seems like they're going to hit, if not exceed, that goal. So many people around the country are seeing what's going on, and they are signing up essentially for ICE, because they understand that even though we've made a lot of progress, you have roughly 600,000 real documented instances of illegal aliens being deported. You have upwards of 2.2 million to even 2.8 million people that have just decided to leave, go home. And you're seeing this with traffic reports. You're seeing this with these numbers from like rent decreases that we're seeing. We're seeing rent decreases, and that's even trickling into the housing market. And then you have Trump with his H-1B restrictions for FHA loans. That in many markets like Dallas-Fort Worth, for example, has cooled the housing market. It was a seller's market. Now it's a buyer's market for the first time, probably going back to early on in the first Trump admin, if not before. So you're seeing all around positive developments being made in the Trump world, and they understand this, which is why they run these ops to demoralize, to stoke fear within the public eye, because they understand, yeah, it's actually popular now to deport illegal aliens. Trump campaigned on deporting illegal aliens. He won a record share of the Hispanic vote in the process. So even the fears about that among establishment, rhino, neocon Republicans, those fears were thrown in the garbage can. So they're in a really tough spot. The whole like open borders lobby, which is probably one of the more powerful disorganized institutions within the United States, within politics, because it had both parties for so long. And now you see one party that is at least willing to break from that, because Donald Trump as a political force came along in politics. And now he and his movement, they have a seat at the table. Now, of course, the post-Trump people, those on the left, those within the establishment, and I guess to an extent some on the fringes that are willing to play along with this and kind of adopt the framework of those either within the left or within the establishment, they're willing to play along in getting out the Trump movement a seat at the table, which is going to be what happens with the whole like post-Trump right thing. And we'll see what happens there when we cross that bridge. But regardless, and I will tell you guys, make sure you super chat if you have any questions, comments, concerns. $5 and above, we have 20 as our goal. We'll see if we can hit it. We raised it up a little bit this time. We'll look and we'll read some regular chats at the end of the stream if we do hit our goal. So regardless, these people, once again, pretending not to understand the argument. And as I put in the title of the stream, they are actually just becoming more misaligned and more misaligned from reality as we see it. And it's crazy because of how they operate and how their main influencers or people in media, people in even not just political media, but we have this quote from a third-rate analyst at ESPN who is far left and I believe from Seattle, which is very fitting, saying that if you disagree with the ICE agent being in the wrong, then you are, quote unquote, not. So they're trying to gatekeep what counts as a human being when they're the ones who are misaligned with reality. They're operating under this like alien NPC framework for one reason or another, which is really just to further their political goals and to stop what is ever happening in this country. I don't know to what extent every single person is going to be involved to that extent. A lot of these people are just stupid. A lot of these people just regurgitate what they see. They see, oh, women get shot. It's horrible. Which, again, it's not a good thing necessarily that this happened for sure. I don't think that the ICE agent himself would say that, other than the fact that it showcased what we're really up against once again. But this isn't like the only instance that we've seen. Now, thankfully, you have leadership like Trump and his administration sending in more and more people to fight what's going on. He sent more ICE agents to Minnesota. Past administrations would see this and cave. Trump says, no, I'm doubling down. I'm going to double the agent count. If this happens again, we'll double it again. We'll keep on going until we actually start to get the positive returns. And that's what you do in a situation like this. You don't cave to these people because there's no amount of caving that will ever placate the people that call you a ghoul or a demon or not human if you happen to be aligned with reality. But those who are misaligned with reality, those type of people, they have decided to come out of the woodwork once again and act like this is like George Floyd 2.0. And of course, because the woman involved is white, you're not going to see much rioting aside from maybe some protests that get slightly out of hand. And also it is true Democrats, they might rethink their strategy about rioting publicly ever since 2020, because a lot of that, you get people, sometimes it was funded, and now not only is USAID drying up and some of their other potential money laundering sources, they also understand it's not really a political winner for them at this stage in the game. So they're just like, yo, you did a murder. That was like what one of the people said on the sidewalk. And it's like, these people will freak out more if they hear like something racially insensitive than if they actually see somebody like get murdered. This is how unserious the brain of a leftist is. In a way, it's like I said, they have like this backwards morality. They have their priorities out of whack. In many cases, it's intentional. Sometimes the mentally ill foot soldiers are just mentally ill, which makes it easier for them to have such a morality. But in a case like this, people need to take a step back and understand what's going on here, because just like what we saw with the whole George Floyd incident, when many people on the right came out and said this was murder, even if they thought it wasn't racially motivated. I mean, when everyone saw the video, even a lot of people, no matter who they were, on the right said, this is bad, it's a bad look. But then a month later, you get the body cam footage, you get the autopsy report, you find out that he had 4 times the amount of lethal fentanyl in the system. You see the fact that the officer called an ambulance for Floyd when he was in that physical state, and that he couldn't breathe before he got on the ground. And then you find out the move, whether people say it contributed or not, was in the police handbook to the point where, this really wasn't what it seemed. At most, it was a slightly mishandled situation that would have ended the same way anyways. So they would have found the guy at home. It would have been an overdose in every single instance. And if you just ask any sort of AI, what are the chances that this person would have survived on this much? It's like far less than 10%. And the guy already was kind of going through a medical episode. So, you find out all these facts about that instance, about that case, and then turns out, it wasn't exactly what you thought, was it? Of course it was not. And then when we look at things like this, now this is old, this is from January, which is almost a year ago. Border Patrol agent shot and killed in Vermont. Not even an ICE agent, a Border Patrol agent. This was in January. So, all these people say, well, the political climate has shifted since Trump took office on deportations. Not entirely, because when you look at what happens, and this is supposedly a nonpartisan outlet, but with a lot of leftist or left-wing followers, you look at this and you look at all the people, you look at things they're posting like this. Officer down, they post. They cheer, mocking the fact that it was Trump's America, even though this was posted 6 hours after inauguration. Gross sexual stuff gratifying this. They're cheering what's going on, saying we do not care. Now, this is relatively representative of how a lot of people on the left behave. They pretend this is not a problem. The politicians in charge will go along with this type of rhetoric. They will not condemn it ever, while demanding the right condemn literally everything. And if the right takes the bait, that's usually when the right starts to lose, because they keep you can't play the left's game. You got to play, if you're going to play their game, you got to play it better than they do. In fact, maybe more efficiently than they do. You don't want to you don't want to act like this necessarily, of course, but people need to understand that anyone that's going out there saying this is horrible, this is a bad look, we should try to aim for shoot them at the tires, they say, that's actually going to make it more unsafe. You don't know exactly what the car can do from that point forward. The person's driving it. If you shoot a brake line, for example, that could be even more disastrous. You don't want to do that. In that situation, it's life or death. Those tires were accelerating. The ice was stopping it. So the ice saved ice in a way, because of the weather conditions in Minnesota. If that took place in Texas or Arizona or California, most likely it would have been a death. And just like this, they would have cheered. They would have said, I don't care. They would have put the celebration emojis, saying all this type of stuff. That's what would have happened. This is what you're up against. These people, in many cases, think the same way as Renee so-called Good, who decided to end her own life by trying to murder an ICE agent in the state of Minnesota. Whether you want to say it was second degree or manslaughter, it doesn't matter. We understand the intent was there allegedly, in fact, I think a little bit more than allegedly, you could look at that and infer the intent based on the video. This was some sort of attempted murder or attempted manslaughter, if that's even such a thing. And that would be the classification. So you have this case that just completely blew up on the left's face. They moved the goalposts, and then you find out you would have been cheering if she was successful. That's the main point. So backwards morality, misaligned with reality, the same way they cheered Charlie Kirk and then they tried comparing this woman to Charlie Kirk. Nobody knows who this woman really is other than the fact that she was a left-wing agitator who lived somewhat of a sad, depressing life, and that doesn't necessarily justify in and of itself the incident, but her own antics that day. It's like you decide to jump in a wood chipper. You decide to do something dumb. You talk about the left. These are people that just have for a long time just devalued life in general. And now when somebody decides to do something dumb, they decide to do something stupid, instead of like any other instance where they might mock it. No, they decide to pretend like she was some murder victim. When the evidence is right in front of them, they say, no, you're the crazy person. The gaslighting must stop. The gaslighting campaign. Is it effective as it was in years past? No. Is the response from the Trump administration much better? Yes. Will public opinion polling on something like this eventually catch up over time as it has for many other things? Yes. And that we know. I mean, the guy single-handedly, he's putting Tim Walz on the edge. Tim Walz is going to be out of a job come next year, come January. The deportation numbers are through the roof. And then we'll talk about 2026, and then we'll talk about 2028, and then we'll get to the super chats because I don't want to ramble on too much about this incident that we already covered ad nauseum last stream. We played the video, but from all angles, the officer camera video was the most telling of all, where you saw this guy and he was put in grave or imminent danger and then decided to act in a way that was meaningful to save his life and necessary even to save his life as this person already hit him with the vehicle. And thankfully you have an administration with a rising approval rating, by the way, that backed up the officer. And that's a good thing. So I'm going to talk about the approval rating. Is it low? Is it what's going on? Because it's only at 44%, they say. But it is also important to note that he has his highest approval rating going all the way back to like October, and it's rising. When many people said that his approval rating would collapse and it would fall. And this is because the economy is starting to kind of turn a corner. You see Dow, remember I said Dow will hit 50K this year. It probably could hit it this week. Maybe not, but it's on the table. Even tomorrow, even depending on what happens. The GDP numbers through the roof. And you could say, well, the average person's not going to see it, although wages are rising. They should likely rise faster. People haven't seen the results of the initial Trump tax cut. When that happens come April, when you probably get some positive job numbers in the mix, wage growth in the mix, as deportations. If you accelerate deportations, wages will grow naturally because Americans are willing to do those jobs so long as they're compensated fairly and not being replaced by cheap labor and having to compete alongside cheap labor. Yeah, they're not going to want to do that, but that doesn't mean that they won't work in construction, they won't work in hotels or agriculture or any of those fields that tend to be a little bit more heavily concentrated with those who are illegal aliens. So you will see the economic approval, as it has already turned a corner a little bit, and Trump's approval as a whole has turned a corner. You will start to see the economy improve. When the economy improves and the public perception of the economy, which is far more important than the raw numbers of the economy. Yeah, unemployment went down to 4.2. Although, to be fair, it was December. How many of those jobs are like seasonal jobs? There's a lot of seasonal jobs in December. Unemployment usually goes down in December. We don't know to what extent that trend is going to continue or suffice. But regardless, it's not a negative thing. It is still a positive development in the economic front. And as the economic approval rises, the approval for everything else will too. That's typically how this works. It doesn't matter. Even foreign policy, which is not directly linked to the economy, but the approval on Trump's handling of every single issue, from foreign policy to crime, is going to go up when the economic approval rating of Trump goes up. This happens across the board. You know, the economy is the number one issue that will dictate the 2028 election. Maybe not so much 2026, but if it does improve, Trump's numbers improve, Republican turnout improves, you go from there. Because it's a lot harder to have a divided party that can kind of bicker about things not getting done when the economy's not doing well. Now, if the economy's doing well, doesn't mean you stop putting pressure that is in good faith and well-meaning on the administration to carry out its other agenda, but it just makes it easier for people who were willing to buy in before election time, who might right now not buy in. You know, if they're going to be badgered with these bull jive media hoaxes and stories that are against Trump, they're more willing to buy them if they feel like the economy is not in the best shape or form. However, you know, all this talk about 5% inflation from tariffs, a recession, all this stuff is out the window, at least in the short term, and probably as well in the long term. And it seems as if Trump's approval rating is on the rise, and that's with some trash polls mixed in. We're talking about it being, you know, no toss-ups around 45, 46. That's pretty good. Could it be better? Yeah, it could be. But you're talking about him inching closer and closer to that 50 mark. If he hits 50 by November, then Republicans have a serious shot to hold the House. If he even is in the mid to high 40s come November and Republicans can turn out enough voters, they still have a serious shot to hold the House. It would help if Florida was able to redistrict and it failed in the state of Virginia, which we have really yet to see what's going to happen on that front. But still, the approval ratings going up, 2026, positive developments all around for sure. And the primaries are going to start in about 2 months in the state of Texas with round one, Texas, North Carolina. There's a few other states that are going to be taking place this spring. The lion's share of them will take place in May, June, July, August. I don't know if there's going to be a primary in September. If there is, it's probably like the New Hampshire. They really got to move that up, especially given the fact that it is a competitive state and you have to have time to unite the parties before election day, which again, you like have the primary, then early voting starts like almost instantly in New Hampshire. It's ridiculous that these states have primaries that late. You shouldn't have a primary post-July, in my opinion. Maybe the first week in August, depending on if your state is all that competitive or not. Like, it doesn't matter if Delaware or Rhode Island or some of those other states that are not competitive have a late primary, because in many cases, the primary is just the election. That's election day. And even in you could find an example like Idaho, for example. If Idaho had a primary in August or September, it wouldn't bother me as much as, I don't know, Arizona, which I think they moved theirs up a week. I'd like to see them move it up further, especially because it's not even fair to the workers. You know, you have these people out there in 125-degree heat, and they're knocking doors and they're doing all this stuff. It's ridiculous that they're even putting these people out there, making them work those long hours. It's ridiculous. But regardless, Trump's approval rating is on the up and up. Could it hit 45% by the end of the month? Yeah, 1% per month is all you really need. And the more positive economic data, the more people see the positive returns. Yeah, by April, you should aim for like 46, 47. And yeah, you could say, well, it's higher. The polls are underestimating him. That's fair. But at the same time, this is a very low propensity party now. So if Trump's approval in the polls shows it at 44% nationally, that's probably the electorate you're getting for like the midterms. So it does actually matter what the polls say, even if the polls can be garbage, which we know they can be. And that's gone both ways in these like special elections that tends to show an overestimation of Republicans. In the midterms, it's a mixed bag, depends on the state, depends on the race. But nationally in the midterms, they've been fairly consistent. However, when it comes down to the presidential year, it seems like Republicans get underestimated. And the opposite was true when they were the higher propensity party, when Mitt Romney was the Republican nominee, and polls showed him tied with Obama in the popular vote, and he lost by 4. It's because Obama turned out more low propensity voters. However, now we see the opposite being the case. The left is the high propensity party. And how do you be that? Well, you got to turn those low propensity voters into the voters of a higher propensity when they vote for your party. And if that happens, you usually have it because you have a cultural change, a climate shift, people getting older, and older people tend to vote more. And we saw like the millennials under Obama, they sat out 2010 and 2014, but came out in full force for Democrats in 2018. That's your super voter now. So there's a lot of things you have to do, but you have to deliver. And for people that say the GOP hasn't delivered, I disagree with them. I just think the fact that everything was shoved in one bill, it gave these people a talking point that, oh, Congress isn't doing anything, but they did like 150 bills in one bill, and they try to say, oh, that didn't actually amount to anything. And maybe it's easier said because we haven't had tax day yet. We haven't seen all those returns. Yeah, you have the funding. You funded the entire border wall, which is great, but the wall's not built yet, so you don't get to really tout that as a victory as easily as if it was already done. So you can't just snap a finger and have everything done. I know it's frustrating. Feels like the opposite happened with Biden in terms of him snapping a finger and destroying everything, given how fast it felt. But at the same time, picking up that mess and then trying to build like a golden age or whatever on top of it, it's hard work, but Trump has laid down a lot of the groundwork, and I think he doesn't get enough credit for that sometimes, just based on what we've seen him pass. Even in that bill alone, passing that bill alone, you could make the argument makes him the most consequential president that we've seen in the past 30 years or so, at a minimum. And there's a lot more that he's done, and there's a lot more that he's about to do, one could hope. So you have all this stuff going on. You have foreign affairs, and Trump is navigating them pretty well. Is he going to get that ceasefire? Could you get a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine? That would be huge to tout. If you have that, and you get that done, you win the Nobel Prize, all this stuff, yes, his approval rating is going to keep going up. It's why the left runs these demoralization ops. And of course, ahead of 2028, it matters. And we're going to be talking a little bit about 2028 as well. Because you have people on the left and people on the right trying to decide who their nominee is going to be. And it's clear, Gavin Newsom is probably all but running. Kamala Harris may run, give it another go. She's going to run for the 3rd consecutive time. However, she's never gotten the nomination in a fair primary. She had it handed to her. It was a coronation. That is indisputable. When she ran the first time, she crashed and burned. However, Gavin Newsom is still untested. Just because he's polling well and has a social media team, even though I think they're not doing as nearly a good of a job as they think they're doing, that does not mean that you're going to be the Democrat nominee. A lot of the voters, if you look at a lot of the polls that include Kamala Harris, she is still in the lead or she's right there. And it seems like the one homeless group is the far left. Now, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez seems like she's throwing her hat in the ring, or is rumored to possibly throw her hat in the ring, which many people rightfully look at as a big joke. However, it's clear that she's trying to pivot away from that. So maybe you could say she's being more serious about a run. The only problem is her own base isn't going to like it, and that's her lane. Now, you could say they don't have anywhere to go, but they might just be more disaffected and or just decide to back like Newsom anyways because he uses power to own the cons, and that's enough for a good chunk of these like Reddit tier liberals. But she's been going on a tirade about Hamas being bad and Iran being like the worst thing ever, which her base isn't going to really like that. And again, you could say there's nothing wrong with her tweet. That's not really the point. The point is that she's like trying to moderate her tone because, this is something that a lot of her base would say is like a virtue signal to like the Zionist crowd. And they've been railing against that for the past few years regarding the whole, like even against Biden with the whole Genocide Joe stuff. But these were the people that were supposed to, find their queen in AOC because she's close to Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and all these people. Apparently not. She's throwing the far left under the bus in a way. Now, you could say, well, the people that care about healthcare will still back her and this kind of stuff, which might be true, but in and of herself, it's not going to be enough for her to win the primary if she's not turning out enough crazy people. So what's she doing here? I'm sure she'll run. She'll probably get like third place in a few primaries and drop out, or maybe they'll find some other crazy far left person. I just don't think the far left has their Trump. Bernie Sanders, you could have said, was the closest thing too, but the problem is that the guy was not able to put together a serious coalition over the age of 45. However, since he first ran in 2016, you've had 12 years of boomers dying off and people who were raised on Reddit entering the electorate. The millennials are your core constituency, the core base now. So the party's changed, the electorate's changed. And this could be an off-ramp strategy where she makes peace with enough people in the DNC, enough of the establishment, where they will allow her maybe not to lead the ticket, but to be on the ticket. Because as crazy as we see Newsom, the left sees him as a neoliberal. They see him as a moderate. They see him in bed with these tech companies. He doesn't support universal health care, all this stuff, which might make him more electable than some of these other freaks and clowns that they're going to try to trot out on that debate stage. It probably won't go anywhere. But AOC on the ticket, now, it is true, you could say it weakens the ticket, makes it easier to beat, gives you more attack lines. However, she checks their woke boxes. They need to check the woke boxes, just like Biden had to pick a black woman, quote-unquote black woman, for VP, for the Supreme Court. Gavin Newsom, he's too white and too male for them, so they're almost certainly going to have to add a woman to that ticket. I don't think it's not going to be somebody like a Gretchen Whitmer. They view her as MAGA now, which is crazy because she doesn't want to off Donald Trump and like took a picture with him or something, and now she's like instantly evil in their book and she has no shot in their primary even if she runs. So again, Democrats can't get away with that ticket. They're not going to do something like put Crockett out there. Crockett is just too much of a unbecoming person. I'm not saying AOC isn't, but she can try to play the role of more presentable or more improved compared to how she was before, kind of like what they tried to do to Kamala Harris, and then put her on the ticket as their like unity 1-2 punch, where Gavin Newsom plays this role. He talks, he pretends to be a moderate out there. He downplays his atrocious record in California. And then you have the balance to that ticket. It's like the good cop, bad cop sort of thing that you're going to have on the Democrat side. So we'll see what happens. I don't know if it would necessarily work, but I think that that's what they're positioning. Meanwhile, the ticket on the right is pretty much set. Everybody wants to bicker. Everybody who supported Ron DeSantis' just disastrous crash and burn campaign, for the most part, is wanting Marco Rubio to run, which is funny because their entire basis for why we should have chosen at the time DeSantis over Trump was, oh no, DeSantis is more conservative. He's more right-wing. He's like, Trump was, he caved to Fauci or something is what they said, which is pretty ironic because Trump has instantly taken action to diminish the influence of like that crowd and lower the amount of recommended vaccines and things like that with HHS, make it more streamlined, piss off big pharma, things of that nature. But that's besides the point. But everybody who said that DeSantis was the more right-wing candidate, which in turn made him less electable, but they were unwilling to admit that for some reason, especially because he didn't have like that Rust Belt appeal. Now they're saying put Rubio out there, who's done a great job, to be fair. I'm not blaming Rubio. I wouldn't even call him a neocon at this point. And if you want to say he is, it's like the first working form of neoconservatism, at least on the foreign policy front. Like he's interventionist to an extent. I think him on the team is solid because you kind of have people who are more hands-off, less interventionist, and then you have people on the team that are more, so they kind of strike the right balance. You have the Donroe Doctrine. Trump is going to be involved in the Western Hemisphere. He's going to demolish the cartels. He's kind of got this plan, this strategy. It is kind of 4D chess in a way how it's unfolding, but you got Maduro out of there and all of this stuff, and it's been great. But foreign policy is one element of the puzzle. You have immigration, you have domestic policy. And while Rubio has significantly improved things like his rhetoric, his record as a whole is not all that solid or all that great. Now, you could say, well, Vance was an ever-Trumper at one point as well. Yes, but he's demonstrated that he has a cogent ideology and he understands things now. And Rubio has said he doesn't want to run against Vance because he's not stupid. He understands that the VP is almost certainly, if they run, and the president is not it's not like a Dick Cheney situation where he was too embarrassed to run. It's clear that Vance is very likely going to run. He's very likely going to get the nomination, and Marco Rubio is going to be his right-hand man. They're going to be working as a team. You would honestly make the case that, okay, maybe Rubio should just stay Secretary of State for life because of how good he's been as Secretary of State, that they should just keep him in that role. And I'm sure that he would be content with that, actually, or maybe he could work both jobs. I think they'd probably have to pass a constitutional amendment for that to be the case, unless they leave Secretary of State open and just give the VP its duties, which would be pretty cool if they found that workaround, because he's done such a great job. Why not just keep going? Why not just continue? I think it's very likely that he's going to have a more hands-on role as VP and mainly in foreign policy. And that's going to be a good thing because it seems like him at Secretary of State, they've done a good job. They projected strength, and that's leading to peace through strength. All this time, for the past 30 years, we've heard failed politicians, mainly these old guard neocons and neolibs, say peace through strength, and then they go in for democracy in Afghanistan as that was going to benefit the United States, and it backfired immensely, all these wars in the Middle East. And they weren't for oil, because we would not take the oil, although with Venezuela, it is kind of for oil, and it's a good thing, by the way, because we need more oil, we need more supply, and it's just an added benefit of it, and it helps out the American people. Therefore, it is America first. Any use of military is not supposed to just equate to neoconservatism. That's not what it's about. We're not necessarily involved with nation building. If there's going to be any nation building, it would be, what do we do in our own hemisphere? What do we do that benefits us? We want Greenland. We want Panama Canal. We want to control Cuba and Venezuela and maybe just make Marco Rubio the leader of every country in the world, right? So he'll be too busy. Anyways, even with his own job, he'd have to give it up to campaign full-time for president. I don't think he wants to do that. I don't think Trump wants him to do that. I think that he knows that if he runs for president, he might have a 5 to 10% chance of winning. However, if he just accepts the VP role, he's got a 60 to 70% chance of winning, you would imagine. And he also has more control over his own destiny, because the more wins the administration posts, the better it is for the ticket as a whole. So he understands that, and that's a good thing. That's great. All of these people, it's the same thing they did with DeSantis. They're trying to go out there, pick whatever pet issue they have, whatever that may be. I don't even know. You get many people with many different ones, which is why the DeSimps are all over the place now. They finally are not a coherent group anymore. They've either gone full to the neocon side or full to the fringes. Some people assimilated well, to be fair. I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of these people that supported DeSantis over Trump, trying to just subvert the movement back to the old guard. Even DeSantis wasn't really playing along with that too much, to his own credit, which is why he lost a lot of donors along the process. Although part of that, to be fair, on the flip side, was because they knew he couldn't win, and then he kind of just trotted and limped along to 21% in Iowa. And Rubio's smart and doesn't want to do that. So regardless, you see, Glenn Youngkin coming out and backing J.D. Vance for president, Glenn Youngkin was also seen as somebody he could run in 2028. And now he says Vance is going to be a great nominee. A lot of people speculate. I agree with Trump and Rubio. Vance would make a great presidential nominee, which is true. So Glenn Youngkin is backing Vance. They're not listening to like morons on social media that are just whining about J.D. Vance in hysteria because, I don't know, he like used to be more friendly with some like talk show hosts than he is now that they don't like, even somewhat for rightful reasons for sure. But then they're just going to use that and drive that stake for nefarious reasons to push their agenda and move the GOP back to the old guard that is incapable of victory, will not save this country, and capitulate to the left. Like, I had a few people reply on my post saying that they'd donate money to Gavin Newsom before they would vote for J.D. Vance, which is the dumbest thing I've heard in my entire life. Like, you're not a Republican if you think that way. You're just a deranged, crazy person if you think that way. So, that's the way it goes. So, regardless, we're going to get to Super Chats. We will get to Super Chats right now if we can. Let's see if we can pull these up. We have plenty in the tank. If they would load, which they're not loading for one reason or another. We're 45 minutes into the show, although we don't have quite a bit for our goal yet. We have plenty here. Security TV 4603 says 172 anti-gun laws proposed in Virginia for 20. Well, this is the problem. Two things. One, Republicans need to nominate people that are capable of performing better at the top of the ticket. Sometimes it doesn't matter. You're not going to win, but you need to get as many voters out so you can maybe diminish the House majority or the power that they're going to have in every level. Doesn't matter what level it is. If you nominate a better candidate for governor, you'll do better down ballot everywhere. School boards, things that actually have impact over people's lives. And also people have to vote as well. You can't sit out. There's no legitimate argument for people to say that they want to sit out a midterm election. Well, first of all, you don't have the right to whine about anything. First, let's get that out. If you are one of these people that says, I'm not going to vote in the midterms, what does that accomplish necessarily other than a defeat you get to whine about? See, we have two types of people. We have whiners and we have winners. We have to be winners. We don't need to be whiners. They say, well, the GOP hasn't done anything. We have debunked that. In fact, this GOP House, with even just that bill alone, has done more than any House has done probably going back decades, if not a century, in terms of positive legislation. Because we've had a lot of Republican houses. They have done a lot of compromising, bending over backwards for the left, and we see how the left repaid us over the years. You think compromising with these people on anything except for maybe like some economic thing here and there is going to be beneficial. It's not, like, at all. There's no need whatsoever. It's not like bipartisanship, especially if you team up to import millions of Democrat voters. How does that benefit you as a compromise? It never does, but the Republicans have bent over for the left so many times over the years. And it's time that people understand that the midterms are important, because if you go out there and you give Trump a mandate, then the old guard and the GOP, if you hate them so much, they're not going to have the mandate to take back the party. If they even are going to be a part of it moving forward, they'd have to assimilate to it. They'd have to get with the times. But doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. Some people just need a wake-up call, to be fair. I think a lot of people, this is the same party that went from nominating enthusiastically, maybe not as enthusiastically, but 2012 with Mitt Romney, and then 4 years later you go to Donald Trump. So clearly people can, change. Even Trump endorsed Mitt Romney in 2012, believe it or not. And Romney accepted that endorsement, but that was before Trump ran against the entire political machine 4 years later. So, this is about pushing the party in the right direction and positive reinforcement. I think that you could make the case it's been deserved with what we've seen. And that doesn't mean that the Senate has been perfect or that rhinos can't be primaried, but I've seen more done in the past year than any other year. Any year. 2017 with that trifecta, which was wider, was disappointing compared to what we're seeing this time around. Paul Ryan with that bill compared to this bill that was passed, this bill is far better. And if this House could, for the life of them, come up with a healthcare solution, that would have gotten through this Senate. Because they're actually working for Trump. They're not working so much to stab him in the back because they understand they're not in the driver's seat. Go back and look at the roster of the Senate in 2017 and look at how many rhinos were there that are gone now. John McCain, Jeff Flake, 2 in one state, by the way, gone. There were several in Tennessee that are gone. Rob Portman, you replaced him with J.D. Vance, and then you replaced him with John Husted. And he's been falling in line enough where necessary. So Mitt Romney was there the year after 2018, and he's gone. Now, it's not to say John Curtis is perfect, but look, we'll take an upgrade if you can get one. Utah is a disaster of a state, but not as much of a disaster as Minnesota. But the fact that a red state produces such trash seriously, they need to fix that situation. There's no debate about that, but you just look around. I mean, how many rhinos did you have everywhere? It was raining rhinos in the Senate. Now you have a bunch of milquetoast people sometimes, but they're not going to backstab Trump the way that we've seen in the past. Like Mitch McConnell, he was one of the better people in 2017 when Trump took office. Remember, he's Cocaine Mitch. He's getting the judges in. Now he's a disgrace and nobody likes him, and he's being kicked out of the Republican Party basically by his own actions and antics. So it is true, somebody like John Thune, maybe not perfect, maybe try to get a primary challenger to compete so he gets a fire lit under him or something. At least what we're doing in Texas. I think we are going to get rid of Cornyn down here, but I would like to see more people talk about that than whining about how they're just not going to vote at all. The whole thing is stupid. The whole thing is dumb. It doesn't make any sense. Tucson Paleocon for 5 says, would you visit Tehran if a pro-Western regime was in charge? Probably not. It would have to become like a Dubai type of place for Americans to want to go. And again, does that mean that they're going to get like the regime they had back when everybody posts like the old pictures of Iran where it was like a paradise 100 years ago? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. So XR Pre 777 for 5 says, I leer a lot from watching you. This is a great leering channel. This is true. We love to, the difference is, unlike a leering center, I actually have 400 live concurrent viewers. They have 0 people that were leering at the time of that incident. So it's a little bit of a different form of leering than we see in the quality, so-called quality, when they have like 120 quality violations leering center. That had to be meme of the year, and that was like one of the final days of the year that we saw. I mean, we've had a lot of great social media days. We had the Venezuela strike, we had that whole ordeal. Our dog show for 2 says, congrats against Oregon, beat Miami for us. I am not a fan of Indiana, if that's what you thought. So I don't know where that came from. But American Nerd 76 says, send in the army and arrest Walz and Fry. Yeah, they should. I understand. You know the media is going to go out there and say, Trump is, he's arresting governors. It's like, well, if he broke the law, he broke the law. And the same thing with these mayors and what they've been doing. You have to, like, something has to give at some point with these people. They can't be allowed to get away with this. But you understand that, like, the media is going to lose their minds. But no, if they find something, if they find proof, like concrete proof, then you make them go to his house in the middle of the night. You arrest him. You do what you did to Maduro. You arrest him. He'll be humiliated wearing his whatever pajamas he's wearing. He's going to look clueless. He'll look like a deer in the headlights, like how he looked on the debate stage with J.D. Vance. It's going to be hilarious. It'd be just absolutely hilarious if they were able to do that. I don't know. We'll see when we cross that bridge. Giblet 6371 for $10 says the left cannot have a good faith debate ever. Their arguments come from a place of incredulity as they constantly move the goalposts when more of the facts come out. This is true. They always, this is how it happens. Every time there's a big incident, the right's been getting better at this, and not doing it at least. They will come out with a diet version of the left. But it's like George Floyd was murdered, but maybe it wasn't racially charged. Okay. I think a lot of us probably were guilty at the time because that initial video did look bad. But, now it's like, let's see the full thing. Let's see the full body cam. I never would understand why anybody on the right would ever be against a body cam given what they show. And the body cams just are one of the biggest reasons why BLM's irrelevant right now. It's because every time they've tried to drum up support for something, people see on the body cam. The problem is the body cam footage might not go as viral as the initial. And if it does, they'll still make excuses because they don't live in reality. But, at the same time, the left will just come out with hysteria and they will flood the zone and they will set the narrative. And the right's always playing a little bit of defense. The right should be playing more offense. They should say, hey, she FAFO'd. And that's what happened. Whether it's, whether you want to call it a tragedy or not, it's not a good thing when somebody does something like this. Suicide is not a good thing, even of people I disagree with, but that's essentially what it was. It was a suicide moment, more so than it was anything else. It was not a murder. So who knows what was going on? Who knows what her true intention was? But given what we see in a situation like that, if you are in the shoes of the officer and somebody is driving trying to drive a 4,000-pound murder weapon at you to run you over, even if you get injured and not killed, doesn't matter. The bottom line is, yes, you have every right to defend yourself in that situation. If you don't, in any state or country, your laws are broken. You have to fix them. Wild and Crazy Bear says liberal women are the worst. I think a lot of people agree with that one. He needs some milk 665 for 5, says Yo Red, just dropping a few bucks. Thanks for being a non-doomer lately on the right. Cooler heads will prevail. Well, that's the thing. There's an industry of people that want to be miserable. Now, you could say, well, you benefit from posting positive information. But I'm viewing it objectively here. That's the difference. It's like, yeah, Trump's approval rating is a little underwater, even if you take the garbage polls out. Yes, that's true. However, there's reasons for that. There's reasons to believe it will improve. There's plenty of things that have been done. And there's also an industry of people that serve to demoralize, because when things are going great, or when things are being, I guess you would say, when things are being like productive, because there's a lot that's been done and you have people trying to downplay it. They're being very deceptive. They're trying to pretend as if the world is on fire because of Donald Trump, whether it's people lying about the deportation or self-deportation numbers and saying they're much lower than they truly are, whether it is whatever, the bottom line remains the same. That this administration has done a lot of work, more work than probably any administration's done in a single year. And there's plenty of work left to be done, which is precisely why, yeah, you don't want to hand the House over to people that are going to impeach Trump if you don't have to. Yeah, it wouldn't be the end of the world because he's not going to be removed, and it could even backfire on the Dems. But you would like for the mandate ahead of 2024 to be in your column. Not to sound like Alan Lichtman, but it is one of those 13 keys. And maybe if he would interpret his model properly, it would actually still be undefeated, which it has not. So American Nerd 76 for 2 Says, is Trump going to fire Powell from the Fed? I don't know. I have no clue. We'll see. Also, does Sims want another Reagan when most don't? Well, Reagan would lose today. That's what people don't want to hear, but it's true. How many Reagan voters are still alive? Like 70% of people that voted for Ronald Reagan in 1984 are in the ground. This is an entirely different generation. It's an entirely different electorate. Some people don't want to hear it. They want to pretend that's not true. They want to chase a mythical Romney Clinton voter. The problem is more than double the amount of Mitt Romney voters died before the 2016 election than that cast a ballot for Hillary Clinton. 4.5% compared to 2%. So you do the math on that, and it's not looking too good for these people who don't know how to analyze elections to really save their lives. Meanwhile, you saw plenty of people flip from Obama to Trump. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to have a lot of like Harris to Vance voters or whatever, but you have to make new voters. You have to retain your own voters. You have to find a way to rebuild whatever coalition or expand the coalition that sent Donald Trump to the White House in 2024 if you are the Republicans, and you have a shot to do so. If the economy is going better, if young people view the economy better, is Vance somebody that's going to be able to put a coalition together? I think he's going to do very well with young voters. I think he will do very well with Midwestern voters, and those are two groups you need, and I think Rubio on the ticket brings the element of the Hispanic vote over that Trump was able to get because Rubio's an effective communicator for that demographic. He grew up in Nevada, which is another important swing state that you would like to have, and you can relate to a lot of working class families from the Las Vegas area. He's an addition to the ticket, I think, that would be positive. And possibly if any of these people are worried about like foreign policy with Vance for some reason, which is honestly one of his strong suits, in my opinion, Rubio kind of balances it out if people are worried that he's too like non-interventionist, which he's really not. He just likes to show restraint. But I think Rubio being alongside him and having a prominent role and seeing the successes of this administration with foreign policy would probably make sure that Vance tries to replicate it or continue the positive work that's been done on foreign policy instead of putting somebody in there who's just going to get just bent over backwards by all the so-called allies we have around the globe for the sake of what exactly, and just display weakness or a performative sociopathy in the case of somebody like a Gavin Newsom, when at best it's just gonna be the Obama era foreign policy on steroids with him, and all the crazy people that'll be working under him are probably going to make sure you have some of the elements of the Biden foreign policy, except for some more brain cells, which is not a good thing in many cases because you actually have somebody who knows what they're doing and they're doing dumb and evil things, which is not the case under Biden because at least Biden didn't know what he was doing. So you have kind of a rough situation there. And if it's anybody other than Gavin Newsom, it's going to get even worse. So keep that in mind. American Nerd 76 says if Rubio becomes VP, make Tulsi the Secretary of State, possibly, or maybe she'll get some other role. Who knows? She was in consideration when it was Trump's first term, and she was a Democrat. So it's possible. Giblets6371 for 5 says, I think some people can't handle the baggage of being a conservative, so they have one foot out. Well, that's their problem. People need to just double down, take a stand on something. It's not too hard to just say, I don't care what you think. I mean, be smart for sure. Be intelligent about how you go about things, but there's no need to cave to these people. I mean, you see how they operate. They want to beat you into submission. They can't control what's going on, and this is how they lash out when they can't control what's going on. So we need to make sure that we do the opposite of that for sure. Mickey111 says, I'm curious what your thoughts are on Rasmussen. He kind of seems all over the place lately. I don't agree with all of his takes, for sure. I don't agree with all of them. I see him around on the timeline. Sometimes he's in chat. I don't think he's in chat tonight, but I've seen him in our chat before. I've met the guy, he's a nice guy, but I don't agree with every single one of his takes. Same thing with Barris. People listen to them, they listen to me. Sometimes there will be points of agreement, sometimes there will be points of disagreement. We'll see, who ends up being right at the end of the day. But I think that some of the dooming I've seen from the poll crowd at large has been somewhat misguided. Now, I understand the disappointment over the recent election results in the past November, but I don't think that they're indicative of how 2026 is going to go, at least not directly. And come to think of it, they weren't even that bad compared to what some people are predicting off of them. And that was while you had a government shutdown with supercharged Democrat turnout in kind of a weird year. It's like Ocean County doesn't move, but it's like where the Republicans have their usual voter base, they did fine, but elsewhere they didn't do so well. Trent Dumpster for 5 says, I predict Tim Walz will seek asylum in Canada to save his skin. We'll see. Our dog show says, my previous super chat was to suggest you look like Fernando Mendoza, not that you root for Indiana. I don't know if I see it. Maybe the eyebrows, but other than that, I don't really see it. But you're not the first person who's told me that, which is insane because I honestly don't see it at all. But I appreciate the super chat. And we'll see. That should be an interesting game. It should be. Indiana, if anyone would have told me that Indiana was a Big Ten powerhouse or a top team historically ever, I would have probably looked at that person like they're crazy. John Campbell 7192 for 5 says Trump hasn't deported nearly enough illegals. You got 20 million with Biden. We can't even crack 500,000. Well, technically, it's how they do the numbers, what they've been able to process and or have processing would be over 600,000 removals for the year, which would be a record. Now, here's the deal. That was with Biden-era ICE funding. Now you're starting to see in 2026, or late 2025, come October, the funding hit from the big, beautiful bill. And from that, they've been hiring people. They have to hire attorneys. They have to hire officers. They have to hire all sorts of people to expedite this process. And they've gotten 20,000 people that are involved now that are being trained, which probably is going to take another few months. So I think by the summer, you're going to see positive returns. But the fact that we've turned a corner, the fact you have zero border crossings, the fact that the foreign-born population's gone down by 3 million. You look at demographic change, it's being reversed. This would have been things that people would have probably looked at you like you're crazy if you told them that was going on a few years ago, would be going on a few years from then. So while the numbers should be higher, while I think they will be higher, the fact that we've already made quite a bit of progress and it's being trashed more than praised, I think that there needs to be a two-sided strategy. And usually people that highlight one but not the other don't have the other side of it. If you're going to be saying, oh no, everything's fine, yeah, there should be some pressure to raise the numbers. However, if people are going to be like, the numbers are not high enough, then I think that if all I see from, so I'm not saying you, but I'm saying a lot of people, all I see is just the incessant dooming. That's not going to that's not getting anyone anywhere. The administration, I don't think, is even going to take that seriously, depending on how the criticism comes off. But I agree, there does need to be more. I think that most people in the administration would agree that there needs to be more, but that doesn't mean the returns for the first year have not been great, better than expected even. I mean, the fact that you have zero, because you would assume border crossings would drop, but the fact that the border would essentially be nearly 100% secure, even compared to Trump in the first term, is pretty big. And the fact that you have the foreign-born population declining at all on net, that's huge. But the fact that it could decline a lot more, I think, is very encouraging. And definitely the Democrats, if they ever get in power again, that will be reversed. That will be undone. So the voting Republican is basically especially if the party can continue to get its act together, are we going to be a country? Are we going to be the United States of America, or are we not going to be the United States? Are you going to import people who are trained and indoctrinated by the system to hate the people that founded this country, have built and maintained this country for so long? Yeah, that's kind of the debacle that we're in here. So we would like the numbers to be higher, but they are higher than I think we'd anticipate. So it's like, it's you gotta take the wins you can get. You're rebuilding the country. If you take a football team that goes from 1-16 to 10-7, but then they don't make the Super Bowl, that's still a massive improvement. You can celebrate it. You can also say, okay, here's what we're going to do to do better next year. It's the same thing, in my opinion. And we're hitting new highs out here for productivity, and you love to see it. Giblet6371 says it takes longer to build than it does to destroy. You're right. You're 100% right. But the problem also is, especially for the midterms, is that so many people are antsy. They want change, and I understand why they would want change quickly. I want change quickly, but doing something bad versus doing something good. People make the analogy. You want to ruin your life, you could do it in one night. But if you want to build a successful life and become like a billionaire, you're not going to do that overnight unless you like hit the lottery or something, which there's no equivalent for that in politics, unless you just want to, maybe you could say, oh, just cross the Rubicon, do X, Y, and Z, things of that nature that are not realistic. And who knows what would happen if you even did something like that. The whole is, you don't want to go down that road for the sake of the flip side of what if it goes wrong, right? That's another thing. Even though it might sound cool, it might sound fun to think about, the left might, but destroying, like I said, destroying is easier than building. And we understand that this is no different than the other analogies. So, super chat from Wyatt. By the way, we're 10 out of 20 to our goal. I don't know if we're going to hit our goal, but make sure you guys send in super chats anyways. The more we get, the more conversation, the longer the stream will go on. So, Wyatt, 1828 for 10, says, I'm worried about how many Gen Z quote-unquote conservatives are socially conservative but support socialized healthcare. Why do they think the government will become responsible with our money? Well, it's because the healthcare system sucks in our country. It does. I mean, you have people that will pretend, oh, it's perfect. No, it's not. However, that being said, we should not want socialized medicine. And you could say, well, what if it works in Denmark? Well, newsflash, we pay for Denmark's military. Now, I don't know about the whole Greenland thing and how that's going to change how that dynamic works. But one thing we understand is this is not a tiny country in Scandinavia that does everything efficiently and has a very healthy population. We have a very unhealthy population. That would mean that the government will have to subsidize those people and also pay for our entire military. It cannot afford it. We talk about the national debt. You're not going to dig yourself into debt, and you're not going to find a way to tax the wealthy out of there. I wouldn't be opposed to a modest wealth tax of 2% on savings over $1 million or something like that. Some people will freak out and call me a socialist that I said we could debate that, right? But that's a very modest thing. That wouldn't necessarily have like the biggest impact on everything. And we've had like things like capital gains taxes and things of that nature that would set some sort of precedence for it, and you'd probably lower taxes on like the middle class in the process and shift the tax burden even more. But you're not going to have government-run healthcare when the government can't even run the DMV. Like, you talk about the efficiency of the United States government, even if you had a healthy population, the government would not be able to operate a single-payer healthcare system efficiently and maintain a certain level of quality. Government employees get paid a lot less than doctors get paid in the U.S. You look at foreign countries, they pay doctors a lot less than they pay doctors in the U.S. We have a lot of medical innovation out of the U.S. because of our health our healthcare system being a free market. So I think there's things you can do, like maybe find a way to streamline a public option through some of these companies and make it work somehow. I don't know how that would operate. Make sure that there's some tweaks to the system where you can make it more of a universal thing, but also reduce certain regulations that would drive down healthcare costs, like, competition within the states, make it more of a national market. And what about our medicine here? Because there's other countries you can buy antibiotics over the counter, Viagra over the counter, all these things over the counter that are these medications. People have to spend hundreds of dollars going to like a doctor and getting prescribed. Why not just walk into a pharmacy and get the medication? If you already know you're sick and you need antibiotics, why not just walk in and buy antibiotics? Why not just walk in and buy contact lenses? If people know what they have, people know what their eyes are at, just walk in and buy contact lenses. Why can you not do that? You can do that in Poland. You can't do that in the United States. So even little tweaks like that can do a lot, and also negotiate the drug prices with the companies. Make sure Big Pharma, if they're going to exist as an institute, as a conglomeration of corporations, basically, there does need to be some sort of like negotiation that you have with the leadership, so long as you have good leadership, to make sure that you can drive down the costs of unnecessary drugs and make sure that there's not going to be this corruption. Make sure you have oversight. If you're going to have regulation, you better do it right. And that means cutting the overall size of government significantly. That's what a lot of libertarian-minded types don't understand. It's like if you're talking about the government doing something, that's like authoritarianism or whatever. But if we were a dictator for a day or a week or a month, then the size of the government would diminish significantly because of how many nonsensical jobs that we have. And you see how they freak out. All this waste and fraud and abuse is uncovered within the first couple months of the Trump administration, and they're somehow trying to spin it as a narrative of, oh, this is like unconstitutional authoritarianism, Trump is a dictator, all this stuff. And it's like, why? Because he doesn't want to have a bloated government. That's the problem, more so than size. It's the efficiency. Usually when things are smaller, they are more efficient, but I don't cling to this small government conservatism thing as a religion, because it's usually, first of all, it's a misnomer / straw man from limited government, for one. But for two, it's weaponized against any sort of use of power that the right needs to desperately make in order to take the country back. So it's important people get that through their heads if they're on the fence about any sort of power use. But I don't think that we need to have socialized healthcare. I say all this stuff and then I'll be hit with the comments saying, you're a socialist, you support socialized medicine. I don't support socialized medicine. I've said that countless times. I've been consistent about that. I just think the system needs a drastic change, drastic reform. Reform larger than what we saw with Obamacare. Maybe not directionally like Obamacare, but something that would get turn people's heads in the public eye. Okay, that changed the system. Most people would acknowledge it. I think Obamacare was a disaster. I think in many cases it changed the system for the worse. But at the same time, if you don't have a plan to counter it, then Obamacare is going to be the most popular bill in the world, because people would prefer a bad plan or a bad solution to the problem to anything else. So Trump needs to make sure that he can fix whatever's going on with the subsidies, or Republicans will lose the midterms, because everybody's healthcare premiums are going up by $100 a month or so if they're buying within the market. And people saw that this upcoming year, especially in the state of Texas. That's going to have to change if Republicans want to stave off possible losses that they otherwise wouldn't need. Now, it seems like they're trying to work something out, but they have to do it quick. They have to do it sooner than later, because if they don't, then Democrats are just gonna ride with that one until the end of time so they can milk it for political points. And then if they get control of the House, they're not even going to do anything to fix the problem. They're not even going to try, so they can campaign on it in 2028, which is really possibly their last shot in many ways, because that 2030s map is not working in their favor. Republicans just flipped the voter registration in North Carolina. They're about to flip the active registration most likely this year, if not next year, in the state of Pennsylvania. So Democrats are in a lot of trouble, and they know they're in a lot of trouble. And that's why they're being desperate. That's why they haven't stopped with the woke. That's why they haven't tried to get their act together. And, they're hoping that a sluggish economy will put them over the top, and a divided GOP will put them over the top in 2028. And they're doing everything they possibly can to run these psyops and tear the GOP apart from within, although I don't think it's going to work because the internet is not real life. And I think we're going to find that out pretty quickly with some of these primaries on both sides of the aisle, for the record. So, all right, we've been streaming for about a good, hour and 20 minutes. So 2 more super chats and we'll wrap it up. Mitchell Ryan 9282 says, Da Bears. Well, they had a comeback victory. I don't know what's going on with Green Bay, but they got to launch Brandon McManus into the sun. And then Alpha Buckeye for 2 says, is Vivek in trouble for the primary or governor's race? No, he's not in trouble for the primary. The guy running against him is like a Candace Owens fan who's like a mechanic car YouTuber and says a lot of things that probably would make him lose Ohio to a Democrat by like 20 points. He's actually a worse, weaker candidate than Fishback in Florida, who is he's another character. But we'll see what happens in those respective primaries. But no, Vivek has flaws, but I think he's going to win the general. And I think that there's more productive things to do than sit here and whine about all these candidates that Trump endorsed that are routinely perceived as like MAGA candidates, because if they lose, the narrative is not going to be Vivek insulted Ohioans and lost. It's going to be Donald Trump is losing a grip on the GOP. He's losing these states that he flipped red, and they're going to stay blue, which is bullshit, by the way. And it's not going to happen, but they're trying to make that happen. So I encourage people to be smart and be careful about how they go about where they're putting their chips on the table. You could say Vivek is flawed. GOP in Ohio shouldn't have coronated him the way they did. Fair game, 100% accurate. I agree with you. However, he's not going to lose the primary. He needs to win the general because the alternative is indeed worse every stretch of the term. And the worst issues for Vivek are national issues more than state issues. And it's just like he'll be governor and he'll probably fade to obscurity because he never had a window in 2024. He's not going to have one in the future. Because the only thing he brought to the table in 2024 was, I'm going to be the stand-in for Trump on the debate stage and make a name for myself. He did that. Okay, well, what's he going to do now? Trump is letting him be governor of Ohio? Okay, well, I guess he's going to be governor of Ohio. It's not the end of the world. I'd rather win Michigan's Senate race, North Carolina's Senate race. I'd rather win every single possible swing Senate race than try to sabotage a Republican anywhere in a general election against a Democrat, especially in the midst of what the far left is doing. It doesn't matter whether I love Vivek or Byron Donalds or some of these other people, which I like Donalds, but I think that there are some questions about his past and how that could impact a general election. But I'll take his electability over Jimmy F's every day of the week because we understand the alternative is not viable, whether people like him or not. And he will say good things sometimes. He will have good messaging, and then he'll have, like, there's no way this guy tweeted that. Maybe you could say it's funny, it's hilarious, but it's unserious in an objective sense. It's like Trump can get away with doing some controversial things. Not everyone's going to be Donald Trump, for one. And for two, Trump didn't go out of his way to like say things that were like for shock value. He just said what a lot of Americans were thinking, and he didn't try to cater to corners of the internet that didn't have as much influence as they thought that they think that they have. So that's it. All right, guys. We will be live on next Sunday. That will be the latest. Maybe if there's room for a stream this week on Thursday, we could do one depending on the level of content that we'll be able to make this week, just because of the fact that we don't know if it's going to be a busy news week or a not so busy news week, but we will have content on the way tomorrow with a video, and I will see you guys then. So before you go, like the stream, subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one. Red Eagle out.